Am I talking? I'm probably not talking. Thinks I'm talking. Stefan, can you hear me?
David, I can hear you.
Ah, thank goodness. Thanks.
What's happening? See your head?
Yeah. Okay, everybody, let's make sure that their sound is off, or this isn't going to work. So can anyone hear me? Oh, do I need to turn this on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
So that's a mic and a speakerphone?
Yes.
Somebody
stop me.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think Phil has some sort of demo lined up for us.
Yeah, are you guys able to hear me okay?
No.
Maybe.
Either we can't hear them or nobody wants to say it out loud. Can somebody affirmatively say that they can hear us with their mic?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you as well.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Great. So what I'm going to demo here is just a prototype of how to make the abstract away kind of the business logic of how you define types and business logic on them in the API server from kind of the machinery of how you configure it all and wire it all together. And so I started out with kind of this theory that said, okay, if I want to define a storage type, the only thing I should need to define is the type itself and maybe one or two lines of boilerplate. And And this way, when API machinery changes and we need to rebase on top of the latest revision, there's very little work to be done. And also it means that someone can get up and running in about 10 minutes. And so I'll do a little demo of what I developed and then kind of explain a little bit about the approach I used to get there. So I have here sharing my IDE with my files, and there's a bunch of stuff in here, but the only ones that are necessary are, this is the main.go file. You can see it doesn't compile right now because I haven't generated the code. But yeah, this main.go file that just says basically start and imports a couple packages. And then you have the docs files all the way up. And then you have your type definition here. So that's all that should be required. And you have this tag here for the code generator to say, hey, this is a resource.
Can everybody?
Yeah,
Can you
zoom in a little bit?
Sorry,
It's hard to see.
No.
You're not in the browser.
Let me open it in the browser.
There we go.
Thanks. Better? Oh, much more clear.
Not really. Screen protector on or something?
It's like you're stuck in the 1970s.
So here's the example package. So you have this main.go file again. It just starts the server. You go dive into the package, and you get APIs. And here's your type. So it has a resource and then defines the spec and the status. And so a code generator will then go and generate all the wiring that's necessary for this. You can see that here. And so I created some wrapper libraries so we didn't have to generate quite as much code. I think I cut it down by 2/3 or so. There's a lot of duplication, like registering and defining the same types in multiple different places, multiple different files. So just by providing one function, attaching the creation there, and then reusing that same declaration in the different places, we're able to cut down on some code. And another thing I did was I used interfaces to allow objects to be dealt with in kind of a generic manner. So one example of this is a lot of the storage strategies used this, each implemented how to get the, get the status off the object and then remove it before updating, and then for the status endpoint, removing the spec and just updating the status. And so they each implemented all this code individually. So I defined a status interface that defines how to get status object off and how to set a status object on, how to get a spec off, how to get a spec on. And that way, just by implementing that interface, there's a common set of libraries that allow you to, by default, figure out the right way to update an object. Another thing I did was I defined same defaults for all the update strategies. So instead of everyone having to say this is a namespace object or this isn't a namespace object, or saying, yes, here's your before create, but don't actually do anything, I just gave a whole bunch of empty ones that work for probably the majority of objects.
Like by default, everything is namespaced because that's the
Exactly
the normal case.
Exactly. By default, everything's namespace, so you don't need to say that it's namespace. And then I'll pull up an example. I allow this to be overridden, by embedding that default into a definition here. So there's this definition, let's see, where is it? Let's see, yeah, here. So there's this strategy here. And so I just, for instance, embed a strategy in it. One can override the individual methods they want just by attaching them to the parent that embedded all the defaults. I still need to add all these package level functions.
Can somebody mute? I'm not sure how to force mute people, so if you could stay muted if you're not talking, that's great.
So I attached these package level functions. These are required only by the code generators. That's the And so that makes it pretty simple to start up an API server. And because the only code that you're defining is this type, every day becomes less simple. I'll bring you to kind of a more example where the idea is you can add on logic as you need it. So it has a sub-resource, for instance, and I define this method, this piece here that says, okay, here's a sub-resource to look for and register. And then so that's defined here, the sub-resource piece request. And then you can add on defaulting functions. So here I'm adding a function to this schema fns, for instance. So now this will override the default and allow defaults to be specified here.
Can you go back to how it is you wired up this thing as a scale sub-resource? Can you show me where it is declared that you have it?
Yeah, right here on the resource, I'd say sub-resource.
Oh,
so scale.
Oh, you just tell the code generator. It's like a little.
Yeah, the code generator will do all the wiring.
I see.
And then I'll show you where the business logic to implement it is.
Okay.
But it says, yeah, so here's the name of the sub-resource.
Like it's a URL. Part.
Yeah, it's like, so you append this to the resource with a slash in between them and you get the URL. Here's the name, the type, that's the type that is attached to. It's just redundant, but it helps the code generator so it doesn't have to parse it out.
Yep.
Here's the name of the request, and then here's the REST implementation.
The type that handles it.
The type that handles it. So if we go up.
May I suggest adding like parameter?
Yeah,
names
key
in those,
value
like,
pairs once we get up to 5.
yeah,
Sure.
this equals this. This
Yeah, yeah.
equals this. Yeah, that's confusing.
Yeah, you have to kind of know it right now. But yeah, I agree that would be improved. Also documentation would improve it. But yeah, if you go up here to the group level, you can see the scale REST. This was the type that was referred to earlier. Actually generate type safe registries for everything. So one thing I noticed like deployment was doing was they wanted their own storage that was type safe instead of having to do a bunch of casting and stuff. So, and that's all boilerplate. It's just a bunch of type casting. So I created one of those for you, and then I automatically will register it in its type. So I create this type, or the code generators create this type, give you the type safe registry, and then wire it out. And then so here's the implementation of that. And then also you can do overriding validation here. So here's the validator that again uses the same approach of just attaching to the default, which doesn't do any validation. The other type, for instance, doesn't have this method and doesn't validate anything.
So Phil, you think of this as something for arbitrary users? Because I would say like we would just use REST storage, right? The generic storage for the REST endpoint.
Well, even for scale, is that true?
I think that, oh, actually, no, that's a good point. So that's actually just this is scale is badly designed and needs to be part of the strategy or something not in that level, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, the general idea is here, if you don't want storage and you just want to implement something that is a higher level abstraction on top of that. You wire in the underlying storage and then you invoke the underlying storage.
Yeah, like I think for anything where you're like doing the simple stuff, you should just be using our generated code, like the underlying etcd storage. But I could totally agree for like proxies or special case stuff, having like a typed registry like this would actually be useful for people who are adapting to build APIs on top of other stuff.
Yeah, like rollback is another one, I guess, or any.
Yeah, all the generic interface level sub resources, like we haven't really talked about this in a long time, but those need to be part of something that's actually dealing at the REST level and mostly not code that people write in that has to know about storage. Like it should be possible to define that, like this object should really be defined as part of a strategy or something much more generic.
Yeah, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
I mean, this is like totally fine. I got confused briefly by thinking about it.
Yeah, I get that. So then I'll just show two demo things that I think are kind of cool. One is I started writing some test infrastructure. So you can say like test new test environment and say start and give it the same arguments you actually give the start and that main function I showed you. And this will start the API server in process and an etcd and wire them up and allocate a new port for both. So they're kind of private, and then give you a client to talk to them so that you can, instead of doing ED tests, it makes it a little bit simpler to do integration tests. It's possible API server already has something like this, but you can see it's pretty simple just to write this code, and now I have a client that I can use to test my wiring and do a create test. And you can see here I test the validation logic so that is actually wired up correctly, and test the scale sub-resource, which is also wired up correctly. And
so this is pretty cool, but it's making me pretty sad that the stuff we have is hard enough to use that you needed to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard for...
This is what Rails looks like. I mean, this is what all the Node stuff looks like, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the inspiration. I've used Rails and Spring as something similar. And the idea is like, you want an API server. So some of the challenges, I feel like the API server machinery may not be hard if you wrote it because you understand how it works.
Oh, no, I think it's hard.
Okay. But like the sample API server I got was 600 lines of like non-generated code. And a lot of that stuff is you have to wire like a lot of the files in there, you have to set up the wiring. And so to get Hello World working, like it's really frustrating to like spend the whole day and being like, I don't know if I'm going forwards or backwards. Like if I'm moving closer to getting this working or moving farther away with my changes. And so the philosophy of it works, and then you know that you've broken it. You can get back to a working place as part of it.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, I would say like having spent years fighting with Rails and every other framework in the world, I don't think our framework is materially worse or better. I think it's just, the problem is that we didn't adopt somebody else's framework like gRPC. And now that requires us to support a framework of some sort.
Yeah. I guess my other thought seeing this is this going to make it harder for us to evolve our machinery? We have this to support.
I would argue the opposite,
Well,
which is that the more people that use this, if we think of this as a relatively static API, which maybe it's not yet, but like
that's I guess that's sort of my concern is how much the abstraction leaks through.
Well, the problem is that most of the abstraction leaks through right now. Part of the reason it's hard to evolve the machinery, or like from the other point of view, part of the reason it's hard to write to the machinery is that like, because we have so many good ideas, refactoring and evolving things and fixing things.
Yeah.
If your PR lives for a few weeks, like you're constantly like, oh, we don't do it that way anymore, the way I wrote it 4 days ago.
Some of that, yeah. I mean, like, so at the REST layer, like the changes are starting to slow down a bit. I mean, we're going to have 1 or 2 per release. At the higher levels, that should slow down some too, but it's not a zero change. It's not ever going to be a zero change.
Right.
And I don't think that we're currently mature enough to say that we're not going to break something, right? Like if an API needs to change, it changes.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. I think part of the problem is if something takes 600 lines to do, like going through those breaking changes is a lot more painful than if it's 2, and the chances of breaking are fewer.
I guess it depends on how easy or hard it is to rebase and actually update and get it to work. I don't have any particular objection to generating a bunch of code. It's just a question of how long I expect those generators to still be valid, or at least
if we lock those generators, what happens? Like you say, so we put out a first version of generators and we say, hey, you can use this and you'll get API servers. Do we really, like the generic API server stuff, like the server abstraction, like changing the contract of an API server, or is the things that are going to break that, not the lower level stuff? Because you can just not regenerate ever.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
I mean, if you vendor, like at the end of the day, like this is about letting you create some bit of code that lets you do something more complex than a third-party resource. There's like first party, second party, and third party. Third party can probably just write something once and it's good enough. But first party is in tree or immediately around tree that may or may not need a lot of generation. Seems like this is really second party, which is groups in the Kubernetes organization that don't need to know it as deeply, but want something that can get them up and going. And then they have an ongoing maintenance cost. For those teams, what's the number we're talking about here? 10, 15, 50?
It's hard to know how many have been discouraged until this point.
I mean, looking at like third-party resources, there's probably like 25, 30 third-party resources that people talk about, and there's probably a couple hundred, 200 that aren't. I would think there'd be way more third-party resources than there'll be of these.
But there are going to be a few of these.
Yeah, for sure. Like this is, I kind of think of this as making it possible to know something about Kubernetes that's more than what you need with a third-party resource and able to succeed on it and have it be kind of production, quote unquote, production grade. Not that third-party resources can't be production grade, but.
So the other, like if Brian gets his way, I know he would like to split our current API resources out of API servers. So we would be the users of it.
Everything would be
Kubernetes
second
devs.
party is another way to say that.
Yeah.
But we're not going to rewrite all those, right? Like we're not going to start. I mean, is that the idea that we would suddenly go to a generating mode for those, and that we would force ourselves to take that pain on? Because then it sounds like we're just creating more pain.
Yeah, I don't know that we would need this for stuff that currently exists, but for new APIs.
So, I mean, I can think of like 2 or 3 big changes that we're going to make to the signatures of the API server over the next year or so. Those are going to roughly correspond to what's happened in client Go, right? We switched to version, we've changed list options around. We're probably going to realize that we have 3 or 4 other things where we need to make subtle tweaks that need to be regenerated. What's the equivalence with client generation? Like, has client generation been helpful enough for the Go code that we think like this similar approach for a smaller audience is going to be just as reasonable?
I guess not all of this it doesn't have to be to take all of this or none of it. And also right now this did not change any API, any code in Kubernetes. It's all written on top of it. I imagine certain things like that storage, like if we are going to be writing things like that registry store, which is just a bunch of boilerplate typecasting, I think we should not make people do that. And anywhere we see like the exact same set of code just being written with a new type being substituted in there, I think we should either refactor interfaces and libraries so that we don't have to do that, or generate it.
Well, and I'll say, and David, maybe, I don't know what your take on this is, but we've done seven or 8 rebases in the last 2 years on top of Kubernetes. And the API changes that mostly come along are not heavily boilerplate. Like the most The most rippling one that I can think of was the update change we put in that changed the signature of update. And even that was fairly tractable. Like if somebody starts with a generator and then goes and refactors, and then the generator also changes, the structure of this code has not materially changed much.
I just want to make sure that I don't end up in a place where we need to take the machinery in one direction or the API server and make significant changes. I don't want changes blocked because, it makes too much pain for someone who ran a prior version of this generator. Keeping a current generator up to date, I don't have any issue with that, right? You check a generator in, we have to keep it working. That seems pretty reasonable. But saying that we aren't going to allow our code to change because of an old version of the generator isn't something I want to have happen. So if we can agree that we won't do that, then my fears are a lot less.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the goal of the generator is to allow you to change it and then allow the updater to be updated and then not worry about having a bunch of people individuals have to make those changes.
Certainly my experience from Rails is that no one ever regenerates after it, but they want that boilerplate out of the way. And then they occasionally use the generators to get new easy things. I think that's a very long tail distribution. Our distribution is going to be a little bit chunkier, as we said, like the second party teams. And so I don't know that it changes it, but I would certainly use this to generate new resources and be incentivized to go fix it. Because it is annoying to go create 600 lines of boilerplate today.
All right, it's been half an hour.
Sorry, yeah. So I just have, I guess the one thing I wanted to ask is, is there enough support to create like a Kubernetes incubator repo where I could publish this stuff?
So I would be a little bit concerned about doing that and then you having drift. How would you plan to deal with drift when, say, the API server changes and we merge the, what's one in progress? Move get server side. We've moved that server side and now the storage that you're generating is no longer valid. How would you handle that?
Vendoring, would vendoring address that?
It would. It would mean that when you tried to re-vendor, you would be paying the costs, as long as you're aware that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with paying that cost here, and then hopefully that's where it stays.
Yeah, then it seems pretty useful.
You click back to your Zoom tab. Sorry. Oh yeah. That.
Can we find a victim to go give us feedback on this?
Do you have a particular user in mind, Phil? Yourself?
Yeah, I was hoping Service Catalog might be able to consider it. Not immediately, but that's the direction I was heading.
Is there any chance there's a customer besides, like that's completely unrelated to your team that would be, or like more distant somehow, a second customer? It'd be nice to get a second set of eyes on it.
Yeah, I don't know if I know of anyone else off the top of my head.
Yeah, we don't have anything in the next couple of weeks to add anything in OpenShift on after we rebase. So I don't know that we would be able to in the near term.
Yeah. The only other person I can think of is Kelsey, in the sense that he's done some cool like demos and stuff related to TPRs, and bringing the bar down for doing stuff this way might also be appealing to him. And
it might be nice for like 1.7-ish, because we'll have aggregated APIs on by default, hopefully, and then it would be more immediately practical.
Yeah.
But it would also, at the same token, it would be nice to have something for people to go to at that time. Like already.
As part of the 1.7 release.
Yeah, or like at least like, hey, this thing is in beta. If you want to make an aggregated API, you can go check this out. So at least for that, it would be nice.
Okay.
So yeah, I think I'm okay with an incubator repo, as long as your README is clear. Okay, I think next on our, if that's it, I think next on our agenda is third-party resource. So how many people actually read the proposal? So Anthony is raising his hand, but I don't think he's in the webcam view. So I got about halfway. I started reading about 15 minutes before this meeting, and I got about halfway through.
So I want.
Go ahead, David.
I was gonna say we've been around and around a couple times. There've been a series of there were some Google Docs and there were issues, and I think we've even brought it up at the API Machinery calls before. I gathered those ideas, wrote them down for changes that we would need to make to be able to have a supportable and fully functional third-party resource, or at least have a structure that we can carry forward. And I was hoping in this meeting that if anyone had fundamental problems with it, we could talk about it here. There's a lot of comments in the doc about, like, can we name this field? Can we invert this condition? Yeah, we'll work through all those. But at a high level, do we have concerns? The one that I saw from you, Daniel, was about versioning.
Yeah, versioning. That's one of the things that I would mention. Like the proposal is like we'll only let people make one version of any given TPR. I really don't see the necessity of that. Like, yeah, it doesn't automatically convert between versions, but I think that's perfectly okay. And in fact, I think we're going to have resources like that in order to do like major behavior changes. So
I think that what I would go with there is that when we have resources like that in Kubernetes, we would extend third-party resources to match the first-party resources. Rather than have TPRs try to run ahead of us and our infrastructure and our tooling, I would say first-party takes the pain first, and once we know how to do it, we allow third-party to do it.
I think that's more work overall. Like, you have to do extra work in TPR to prevent people from doing this. So, like, why not just not do that?
Because none of the other infrastructure that I mentioned properly supports it. I mean, off the cuff, we have controllers that will suddenly start behaving strangely, right? Garbage collection isn't set up for it. Namespace cleanup isn't set up for it. That would change the behavior needed for admission plugins. They're doing referential checks. You have resources that aren't going to function properly for it, like RBAC rest storage.
I'm not convinced about that, actually. I think garbage collector has the opposite problem, where it doesn't realize that multiple versions point to the same thing. So
not anymore, right? Or at least not with pulls currently open. Things like the admission plugin that's getting created now does a check via a REST mapper, which assumes that the groups are coherent. The caches.
There is a concept we need in our system, which is what we need in our discovery information, which is what resources are derived from the same key space or stored by the same vacuum store. Maybe there's a question, but yeah, we don't have this right now. We need it, but this is like, in my mind, this is a pretty different thing from third-party resource. You can just get people not to do that.
Well, I just don't want to have third-party resources run ahead, right? The structure to have a single version is the space of a single field, right? If that's a field that we need to change later, we can change it. We can add another piece to it. We can rev a V2 that combines and has preferred. I mean, it is definitely growable to the point that if we want to have multiple versions, having a single version is trivial to do here. And I would try to match our first-party behavior as closely as possible and not try to do something different.
I guess I don't find that convincing. Like I see the places where our first party behavior doesn't work this way or doesn't permit this right now. I just see as bugs.
Okay, but they are bugs that are pretty fundamental to the system. Why not try to fix those bugs separately at a different cadence if you believe them to be bugs, but not change behavior for one subset of resources that will suddenly just not work with our existing tooling. Right? I mean, queue control isn't going to do the right thing. I do a list, it won't work right. It seems like you really want to try to get those bugs that run all the way from API server to REST storage to controllers to queue control to the generated clients to the informers. If you want to fix all those, I would say you want to fix those first rather than creating something that you know is going to break them.
Maybe we should take this discussion, this aspect of the discussion offline. I'm really not convinced that the problems are that bad. The other major comment I had is that the proposal had a big section on making names unique, but I'm not convinced, and like adding conditions to the status. Like I'm not convinced that any if the names are not unique. I'm not convinced that that is a problem we need to solve, and if it is, I don't think we should solve it that way. Specifically, of all the names there, we're going to keep the plural resource name unique by putting it in the TPR resource name. And
that one shares a key space for, say, queue control with singular resource names. Singular and plurals share a key space, and you have places that depend on singulars and plurals sharing key space cleanly. For example, queue control and the REST snapper, which means that if the REST snapper depends on it, you're also getting affected in controllers like the garbage collection controller and the namespace controller.
So where is the singular resource name used?
Most commonly in queue control, you'll use it and reference it. I think it's also used by the HPA controller. And I know that the HPA controller has an option for using kind. So that ends up having to have a unique one-to-one mapping, or you'll break the HPA controller.
So if anything that's assuming that there's a unique kind to resource mapping seems broken, because I don't see why you can't have the same kind in multiple places in your API.
Yeah, it's funny. We had this exact same argument a year and a half ago. I was on the other side. So yeah, I would agree with that. But again, it's the state of the world as it is now. I would like to be able to integrate with the pieces we've already created that exist today. And if we wish to relax constraints moving forward, we can do that.
So certainly kind to resource, there has to be a canonical mapping for kube control create at a minimum. So that is fairly easy to say. The duplication of singular and plural, honestly, we should go back in time and shoot ourselves, but in the absence of the time machine, we do need to at least be able to ensure that it's impossible to get in a state where you have both conflicting and returning different things from different spots.
The concern here is where the plural of one type has the same exact name as the singular of another type.
Or so we've added a couple of S's at the ends of things. I'm mostly concerned about this from a security perspective, which is somebody manages to trick the system into storing and reading resources through a different path. So
it looks like some part of the system believes they're maybe accessing a third-party resource. In reality, they're accessing pods or secrets or something like that through some sort of trick of S's.
Right, and I'm not saying that's the biggest problem we have, but it would certainly be it's kind of one of those things which is, if we can come up with a way to have a clear set of rules and everybody's going to agree with it and then enforce it very strongly. Third-party resource is the only thing today that can add things into the namespace of resources that is nominally not a super admin role. Now, if we keep it like anybody who adds third-party resources for end users is stupid. That doesn't mean though that because of the way that create and a couple of these other things work, it can't happen accidentally. And so I'm kind of worried about the trick someone into running a create as you install a third-party resource and then immediately get access to secrets or something like that.
Yeah, I don't see a good reason to leave this underspecified. Like, it doesn't make sense to try to design it so that you avoid such conflicts.
Okay, then my I guess my second criticism is why wouldn't we handle this with an initializer or an admission controller? I don't understand why we want to just sort of detect it after the fact and leave the object in a broken state.
You're saying that you would have an initializer try to observe the current state of the system.
It wouldn't fix it.
Normally.
Right. It wouldn't fix upgrade.
For like service IPs.
So
it's the same problem.
Isn't it possible to create a third-party resource like wouldn't it have been possible in the past to create a third-party resource named deployment, and then in the next release deployment gets added as a type?
Yep.
So like a static check at the time that you create the third-party resource doesn't cover all the cases.
Yeah, I think that shouldn't be possible because the group name you use should be a domain.
The group should be different, but
apps. I mean, like any of the new types we've added that have domain names, like I think if we add something to core and someone has already camped that, or someone sees that we're adding it and then camps it, what are the implications of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's also I want to be able to update it. I want to be able to make sure that I can create it, and then if something goes wrong, I can try to fix it, similar to how you can, I don't know, fix other resources like replication controller with broken service account link, or it seems more akin to that than something that we would enforce when it gets initially created. We've only done that in the past for resources that present security problems, like say RBAC escalation check.
Or init containers.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can create something that has a shot at working. If it has no shot at working, we'll reject it. But if it has a shot at working, we'll create it, and if it doesn't work, we'll give you a bad status on it, and you can fix your object in place.
Maybe it's not terrible.
I think computing just sucks. I think that's what we should burn it all to the ground and start over again.
So I may have more comments on this. I only got about halfway through it. So did anyone else?
I also, one of the things, Dan, like I could see, like we will have, I think at some point we're going to have status for things like controllers that are doing updates and need to communicate to clients. So like if we're working under the assumption that there's no magic upgrades for third-party resources, because no backwards compatible magic changes, because no one's ever made magic backwards incompatible changes magic. When someone has to go through a breaking change, like the controllers that are running that resource might actually need to coordinate on the status of the third-party resource potentially. That is potentially something that as a scratch space we need to use, although I think if we do conditions for that, then that actually makes that problematic because you couldn't change the definition of it at both the API server side and for a third-party relatively untrusted controller. I'm thinking of things like migrating down, read-only, updating.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. It's hard to describe, like in an API object, how you could actually make that functional for what you would want to do. I think once we get a clean foundation in place, especially if we can make it small and easy to look at, being able to add something like status, or being able to have an obvious spot where you say like, hey, I want this one to be no spec changes for this TPR type. I think that's something that we'd be able to build on top.
All right, any more discussion on?
I have a meta point about how we run this meeting, which is when we go through these docs, I often am unclear about, is the goal to get an LGTM or not on the thing? And I feel like we often raise some issues, there are some issues, and then table it and move on to the next thing in the agenda. So starting next time we do this, like, I don't know, this is like stream consciousness, but I'd like for us to say, like, this person has 10 minutes to present, and like the goal is either to approve or send them back with like address these things and come back in 2 weeks, because I feel like we talk about these things and then don't resolve them. It feels very...
Yeah, so last week I was trying to do that with the proposals, or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
David, were you hoping for an LGTM on this, or was this?
No. This is a new proposal I dropped it in 2 days ago. What I wanted to do was find big points of disagreement and have a chance to talk about those, right? So the aspect about versioning and the aspect about name collisions and how we handle the value space. That is exactly what I wanted to get out of it. But I think people should have more time to read it before we do an LGTM and try to merge it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think at the same token, like, I don't think everybody in this room follow the contract to read the proposals before coming to the meeting.
Okay.
And I'm guilty of that on the next proposal, which is the advanced audit proposal. I know exactly zero about this. I don't know who put it on the agenda. So who?
That will be me.
Yeah.
Hey, Mati here. So I put the audit proposal in the agenda because I want to start some discussion. I presented the topic during KubeCon 2 weeks ago in Berlin. I talked with Alex more about it a little bit, and he suggested that I should generally let you guys know, and SIG Security probably, or SIG Note. I'll probably reach out to both of them, and so that you are aware of what's going on, or what's the direction, and eventually gather some feedback around it. I've noted that some people from your side, and that will be Tim Sinclair and Alex, are interested in it, and Eric Chiang, but I think he's from CoreOS side. And we have some interest on the Red Hat side as well.
Can you give us like the elevator pitch of what it's about?
Sure. So currently we currently have some auditing in place in Cube, but it's like super basic. It's just a filter inside of the handler chain, and it just logs information about incoming requests such as URI, the customer IP, some information about the user, the impersonation, if those are available, and additionally the return code when we get back to the customer. And for that reason, we put the auditing currently between authentication, but before impersonation, so that we can get information about both the actual user and the user that we're trying to impersonate as. But that's very limited, as I said. So the advanced audit proposal that I worked with Stefan quite some time ago was to be able to allow a little bit more, to provide users with a little bit more information about what's actually going on. So we've actually proposed 3 different levels what should be logged. The first level was will be identical to what we currently have, which will be just the HTTP headers and the information. The second level we were thinking about was the request object, and if possible, all the way down to the storage, maybe providing you with the details, what actually changed about the object that you're trying to, that is being passed in the request. For that reason, we come up with an idea of being able to create some sort of a audit event, and the audit event would be filled in by those levels with additional information, depending on which level can provide you what type of information. And at the end, that audit event would be either stored on disk or sent over to some backend. So that's in like very short words what's the proposal is about. I've talked also with Nikhil during KubeCon because there are other things that happened in the Cube world between when the proposal was initially written and now. And with that, I mean the API, for the API server, we have also the Cube aggregator, and there's also the federation. So, but I'll probably leave the federation out of scope for now. Hopefully, we will address that sometime later on. But it would be nice to have some information sent over between the aggregated API server and the actual API server, how you can connect, so that you can easily track how the information flow from which from the aggregator to which API server, etc., etc.
All right.
Yeah, more or less.
So I'm wondering, do you have like a reviewer in mind, or who's shepherding this? What's the urgency? That sort of thing.
I think Alex and Tim Sinclair from Google, they were interested in. Stefan did some initial work with me, so I'm hoping he'll do some review as well. So nothing in particular. I was just interested in moving the discussion forward.
Are you targeting this for 1.7 or for 1.8?
That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Is do I need to like time for reviews of this document, or is it just out there?
So
or what?
I was initially thinking that if we could switch, because as I said, currently we have the filter. If it would be possible to have the mechanics for filling in the audit object in for 1.7, and then build on top of that in the next releases, that would be awesome. Because with the mechanics in place, adding additional levels will be basically a piece of cake. That's what I'm hoping for, at least.
So if you're hoping for parts of it in 1.7, then you kind of urgently need design review, like right now.
Yeah, sort of. I'm hoping for that one. If it won't make it 1.7, I'm not gonna cry or anything like that. I'm just bringing this to your attention, more likely.
Okay.
I'm currently addressing all the feedback that I gathered in KubeCon, all the comments that I got between KubeCon on the proposal itself, and I'm hoping to update the proposal by the end of this week.
So I confess I didn't hear everything you said because I got distracted by the internet. I'm sorry. But one question I have is, did you say, or does your document say, does it specify a storage system, or does it simply say how we will extract audit information, and where you want to send it is up to you?
Yeah, the latter. Meaning you will provide us with some kind of either we'll go with the default current approach, meaning we'll log to a file system, or you will provide us with some backend and we will send you some JSON or whatever with the audit event, and you as a cluster administrator will be responsible for storing that. Because obviously we'll be interested in going through the data and should be searchable and that's usually dependent on your installation.
Cool. I know we have some people who've worked on auditing already at Google who should probably be made aware of this if they aren't
Tim
already.
St. Clair, who he's mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael Rubin was looking at it as well.
I think the result of that is that Tim St. Clair is
okay.
looking at it.
Right.
Yeah. So I think you probably are going to need David or myself or maybe one of a few other people to review this. So
I would also say that the implementation details of this affect this group, but by and large, the requirements and the use of it applies much more to like SIG cluster ops or some group like that, like the potential users of it, not the implementors of it.
Yeah.
So make sure that like that group really knows about what you're doing and has given the feedback as well.
I think I've seen something from the Poland guys too. They were comparing an audit trail with some internal system you guys have for Borg.
Yeah, this is the discussion about Infrastore versus this. So we kind of said Infrastore is much later down the road.
Okay.
This is not Infrastore. This is definitely not Infrastore.
Right.
Okay. I just remembered I'd seen something go past and I didn't pay much attention to it.
Yeah, we had a clear distinction that audit is a near term. The system must reliably offload to some other system. A record was changing just from a pure security perspective. So SIG on-premise also I think is relevant because this is practically every enterprise in the entire world that deploys something at this scale requires audit. It's not an option.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I think we're out of time. So thanks everybody. I'll try to make time to review this. So, all right, thanks.